still under transparency, we shall cover a lot of topics today. And my focus today is tax. The aim today, we want to ensure that your organization, church, school is registered with the relevant tax authorities and that they meet all their tax requirements. We shall also go ahead and talk about funding and the importance of diversification and reserves. By the end of today, we shall know the different type of taxes. Even if you're not in Uganda, at least I'm sure they are kind of similar. We shall talk of the tax-based practices, which will cut across. We shall talk of other statutory requirements, insurance, diversification of funding, and of course, we shall talk about reserves briefly. Now, this presentation I based on the Ugandan tax law, which may apply to most of the countries around. But the focus here in this first slide is income tax. This is the tax that is charged on income from all sources, and it's an annual tax charged. In Uganda, we charge corporation tax at 30%. Actually, other people call it corporation tax. But I want us to note that NGOs in Uganda particularly are exempt from this kind of tax. And therefore, as an NGO, you must ensure that you are in good standing with Uganda Revenue Authority. That is the tax body in Uganda. You are also required to process income tax exemption. Much as your NGO is exempted from income tax, you are supposed to file annual income tax returns. And mark you under income tax, all the income that the organization earns, for the case of NGO, all the income that you earn, provided it is directed towards the activities of the NGO. I'll give an example. If we are basically in provision of teacher training, provision of school fees, scholastic materials to children, and every income we have is directed towards those activities, then we qualify for our income to be exempt. Next, in Uganda, we have PAYE, that is payee, or you call it employment tax, tax that is charged on employment income. We are required in Uganda to file this on a monthly basis. All organizations that employ staff are required to file returns, and you're supposed to withhold the tax from the employees and remit it to the tax body by the 15th day of the month. Failure to do so, there is a penalty, and the balance also attracts interest at 2% per month on a straight line basis. We also look at withholding tax. This is what is charged at source. If, for example, an organization supplies commodities and you're paying them for the service they have supplied, or they have an audit company or asset valuation consultancy, in Uganda, you're required to withhold 6%, retain 6% from their payment, which means you will pay them 94% of their gross. Then the 6% you remit it to the tax authority. And you also have to file a monthly tax return for this as well. Failure to do so, it will also attract interest of 2% on a straight line basis. Now, we have also sales tax in Uganda. Sales tax, which we call it value added tax in Uganda. Now, I highlight the point that since NGOs are not in the focus or are not in the business of selling and buying, or buying and selling, in many cases, all the items we buy are utilized by us. For example, if you buy books, you are supplying books to schools, you buy and you're the final consumers. So you find that all the value added tax in the chain, the tax is felt by us, the NGOs. So how can we ensure that we mitigate we reduce this burden? One, we must always make sure that we transact with tax compliant companies. We must ensure that all the organizations that are charging VAT are actually registered to do so, and they are remitting it to the tax authorities. Currently, Uganda has an initiative, they are calling it Kakasa, which was brought to ensure that all the taxes that are charged through maybe VAT is remitted. Now, for us as NGO, the tax body is working on this. As NGO, we are supposed to remit, we are supposed to ensure that whoever is charging us VAT is giving us a tax invoice generated by URA, that is the tax body in Uganda. Anything that is not from URA, you're not supposed to, you shouldn't pay VAT for it because they are not remitting. And there's also an initiative that is also ongoing. There's going to be a VAT refund if you have been charged VAT. For example, let me give an example of NGOs. You are paying a lot of VAT. They are planning to start reverting, to start paying you back a certain percentage of the VAT that you pay. So this is even actually gives you an advantage where you should even transact with tax registered suppliers. Of course, we have other forms of taxes, which is excise duty, rental tax, import and export, motor vehicle, and stamp duty. Name it, there are quite a number of them. I highlighted the ones that I thought are important for our setting as NGOs. Now, the best practices in regards to tax, one, as an NGO, you must ensure that you register with URA and you have a tax identification number, TIN, and this cuts across. You must ensure that you register for the necessary tax aids. For example, you can register for income tax, motor vehicle, stamp duty, import and export, payee, that is employment tax, and withholding tax, name it. You must ensure that you transact only with tax compliant suppliers. In Uganda, all organizations are required to ensure that the people they deal with have tax clearance certificate from URA. And those who get tax clearance certificates are the ones who have fulfilled all their tax obligations. And you must also ensure that you file your returns on a regular basis. You can either do it on monthly basis if it is payee, if it is withholding tax, VAT, or annual basis if it is income tax. Now, in Uganda's case, we have what we call NSSF, Enfold National Social Security Fund. The employer is supposed to withhold 5% of the employee's salary, employee gross, and then on the 5%, he is supposed, or they are supposed to add 10%. That is making a total of 15%. And that is supposed to be remitted to NSSF on a monthly basis. Remember, it is a law, and any organization that does not do that can be punished or can be prosecuted. We also consider insurance. Organizations should ensure that all their employees are safe and the working conditions are favorable for them to work. So I would request, if it is possible, you consider workers' compensation for your employees, consider insurance for the employees, and even medical insurance if possible. Now I'm going to cross over and then we shall talk briefly about funding. If you have any questions, you can be writing them down on the chat. Now, diverse funding, this means to source for funds from a range of available opportunities and sources. Instead of focusing on one line or one source, you could consider several other sources. I'll give an example. If you have a business and, for example, the business is only selling maybe books, you would consider maybe selling as well as pens. You may consider selling all the other scholastic materials since they move hand in hand to diversify your source of income. So even us as NGOs, we would consider diversifying the funds, look for the available opportunities and consider diversifying. Now, restricted funds, of course, we may get funds that are restricted. For example, if you get funds that are particularly for education, that means you should spend it only on that. Remember, we are talking about transparency. If a particular donor has given you money to spend on education, it does not mean you should go and spend it on welfare or something else. That is about restricted funding. Unrestricted fund, of course, it is opposite. A donor may give you money and will just give you money and say you can use it for whichever area you think you have need of for that money. So we're going to talk about briefly about reserves. You know, it is very good for an organization to consider having some kind of reserves. And I describe reserve as just a part of profit or part of your income that you set aside to meet any future uncertainties or future unforeseen events. Why do you think these reserves are important? There are, of course, several importances of reserves. One of them is to expand and develop. If you have a project that maybe the organization, school or NGO expects to expand or to explore into, if you expect to move into a given kind of business, you'd consider setting a certain income. Remember, if you're getting income from donors, there must be approval. If they have approved you to set aside certain portion as reserve, then you're well and good to go. To repay liabilities, you can use the income, the reserves, to pay future liabilities that you may not know of. You can also use reserve to replace an asset. Say maybe you have a motor vehicle and you expect to replace it in the future. You can decide to set certain portion of your income just to replace an asset in the near future. You can also set certain portion of income to meet unforeseen liabilities. Like sometime back, no one knew that Corona would come and it would cause a lot of this chaos. But if you're an organization that has set up reserve for such unforeseen liabilities, then you would be shielded from all the disadvantages and that coronavirus has brought into this world today. So I want us to just brainstorm. You can type or you can just unmute your mic and just share with us what do you think there are ways that we as organization can raise reserve? How can we accumulate our reserves?
Isaac, I think that one of the things you talked about was having unrestricted money, because you have some options. You can use that money sparingly to make sure that you have reserves, because it is unrestricted and you can do with it what you want. But one soft way is ensuring that you spare your reserves and use resources that are more restricted. So you begin to build your reserves. You spare your unrestricted money so that you can use the restricted money, and it allows you to have some more reserves. So that's an easier way, I would suggest.
Thank you so very much. I suggesting for those who are not hearing that properly that you can always source for unrestricted funds. Once you have the unrestricted funds, you can always set a certain portion of it as reserves for future or unforeseen future, or for future future consumption or future expenditures, to meet future expenditures. So
Isaac, there are a few comments in the chat.
Okay, please.
Which say, well, there's actually two people, Susan and Viva Network Zimbabwe, saying that providing consultancy services to generate income.
Okay. I'll just go through this very quickly, then we shall take questions. You would consider saving. We can use the money we have sparingly while saving the costs. If we can buy if we have something for 10,000 and we know a source where we can get it at 8,000, wouldn't we consider buying it at 8,000 and then save the other part? Then we can set, one of the things is if you set smart goals, you can accumulate your reserves. How? Remember, these are also the ways you can use to raise your funds. When you set goals that are smart, they're not ambiguous, they are just, they are focused, they're within the limits of the organization. It's very good to know your organization, how big you are or how small it is. And then you set goals that fit within the organization. If you set goals that are beyond, you will try so hard to meet those goals and you never reach. And you find that you're blowing a lot of money or a lot of funds on some of these things that you are planning to do. Another thing is to be transparent in all transactions that you do. When you are transparent in your transactions, you are likely to spend less. Let's assume, I'll give an example, maybe in procurement. If you do everything in a transparent way, you're going to save a lot of money in your purchase, and you'll end up saving also a lot of money. Map up your network. Make sure you know the people who are doing the work that you do. You know the people who can connect you, and you're known in the area. You understand the area, you understand the business, and you can learn, you can build your capacity through your network. Use social media effectively. I'm sure most of us have seen those crowdfunding things on social media where someone is raising money maybe for someone's medical bill, and you find that within no time they hit their goals. I'm not saying you go and write, it's an effective way, of course, but if you are very visual, like there are many organizations who are doing a lot of things and we even don't know that they are actually doing a lot of good things in our neighborhood. So the references is right there: Workers' Compensation Act, the Employment Act, Income Tax Act, NSSF Act, and then Domestic Tax Law Handbook. So I think our time is well spent, and I think we shall take a few questions or comments or additions.
If I could just add a few comments there. Thank you so much, Isaac. Just to note for those people who joined after we'd started, Isaac works with Crane in the finance department, so he's very knowledgeable on the topic of tax, and thank you for sharing that today. I just wanted to note also that just to emphasize really that if donors are giving money for grant purposes, restricted funds, then they will usually specify that they're not to be used for reserves. And so in using those funds for the purposes that they're meant for, you would not be able to kind of save any, if you're saving money there, cost saving, you wouldn't be able to put that into your reserves. But as Paul said, maybe if you have income from other places that's not restricted, and you're able to use your grant money for the purposes that it's meant for, you might have some within the unrestricted income that you can use as reserves. We just have a couple of other comments in the chat. St. Paul's Jabando is also saying other income generating activities, so hiring building facilities, hiring space, and others at our disposal, as long as it follows a transparent process. That's a good comment there. And then Segeni says, are there some taxes that non-profit organizations are exempted from paying?
Yes.
I think you mentioned that, didn't you, Isaac?
Yes, I did mention that, but maybe what to point here is the PAYE that is charged on that is the tax that is charged on the employment income is not, for example, is not the organization paying. It is you, the individual, who's paying, but the organization is only acting as an agent for the tax authority to withhold. You know, when we say that, where many people get it wrong, when we say that NGOs are exempted from income tax, people think that if I earn income from an NGO, that income is also exempt. It's not that. That income is for you as an individual, but any income that is for the NGO, the income that the NGO earns is one that is exempt. But when NGO is paying you, remember it's a benefit to you, then it attracts tax. But the income that the NGO earns is tax exempt.
Thank you,
Isaac, I was wondering whether we really call that income. Okay, sorry.
Whether we call that
Humphrey, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted
to...
I
was just thinking that those are funds that have been availed to you to implement activities. Because the word income sometimes feels like I'm earning money, whereas funds available for use is just funds, and that's why they're not taxed. I'm not earning money, I'm not making, because income sometimes I think is a word that is synonymous to business, just like the word profit. Okay. So instead of saying profit, you might have some surplus funds, not profit. Funds that have remained because you've not spent them. So it's just those words that sometimes I feel can confuse us. Over to you.
Yes, Paul, you are very right. It could be the best perfect name is funds available, but for some reason, you know, the restriction we have is that, if I may say, is that NGOs have not fully been, we do not have like a body that can regulate, let me say, regulate that can set standards for NGOs. And I think that's where the problem is, because you find that even in the URA's return, URA, for those not in Uganda, it's a Uganda Revenue Authority, the tax body in Uganda. Their return does not actually, is not so structured for the NGO. So you find that you find you as an NGO to fit in with the other people. But I think you're right, it wouldn't make sense if you're calling it income, because it's not actually, the organization here is acting, let's take an example of Crane, is acting as an agent to implement. The funds are just passing through to implement the other activities for which the NGO was founded.
Isaac, I wanted to re-echo Sigeni's question, probably is something he's trying to understand. But we have business companies, for instance, and we have NGOs. Are there taxes that you can categorize and say that these taxes are not paid by NGOs, but they are paid by business organizations or companies? Probably categorizing them or mentioning them would be helpful for him to understand that.
Yes, there could be. Like an example, any person in manufacturing is supposed to pay excise duty per product manufactured, which doesn't apply to other people. But then the general outlook, income tax is the general tax that everyone else is required to pay, any organization. But for the case of NGOs, they're exempt from that. But as you go industry-wide, like for example, I'll give an example. In the amendment of the oil and gas laws and all that, you find that there are taxes that companies dealing with oil and gas, companies operating oil and gas pay that other organizations don't pay. So there is that depending on the complexity of the businesses. For example, if you're dealing in mineral, generation of minerals, they are like mining of minerals in Uganda, there are taxes that apply to you that does not apply to any other person in the different industry. I hope that answers.
Thank you, Isaac. I'm afraid we're running out of time there. We just have 1 minute remaining. So just to say that please familiarize yourself with your tax laws in your own country, whether that's in Uganda or one of the other networks joining us. And yeah, be sure to follow all of the tax laws that are applicable. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any more questions, I'm sure you can forward those on to us. And yeah, check out the rest of the standards that have been sent out in the daily WhatsApp and emails. Thank you very much, and we are going to leave it there.